Hertfordshire Zoo, formerly known as Paradise Wildlife Park, is not a big zoo at all. And even though a significant portion of the 6.5 hectares grounds is dedicated to a dinosaur area and other attractions, nevertheless a surprising number of exciting animals live here, especially big cats, tigers, lions, snow leopards and jaguars, as well as other highlights such as sunbears. This of course raises the question of whether the animals can truly be kept appropriately within such a relatively small area. And indeed, the zoo, which was originally founded in the early 60s, was once described as the worst zoo in Britain. But those days are long gone. Since the 1980s, under new management, the zoo has undergone significant transformation. So today, Hertfordshire Zoo has established a much more stronger reputation and gained national exposure through the CBBC series One Zoo 3, especially among younger viewers. But how good is it really? Is it worth a visit, even maybe as a tourist from London? Let's find out and see all Hertfordshire Zoo has to offer. The zoo is located north of London, near the town of Broxbourne, in the namesake ceremonial county of Hertfordshire. Arriving here, you quickly notice that the park is divided into two sections by the access road to one of the car parks. And when you enter the zoo through the main entrance, you initially find yourself in the part of the park where no animals are kept at all. Instead, this area features a water play area, various attractions, food outlets, and the large dinosaur forest, which we'll talk about in more detail later. Naturally, I wanted to head straight to the world of animals. So it's back across the access road where our tour really begins, starting with the first proper highlight. Lions of India only opened on April 1st, 2025, but it's not an entirely new facility. Keeping lions here has a long tradition, and one lion in particular, Bobby, played a pivotal role in the zoo's history. Originally, Peter Sampson had intended to use the zoo's grounds in the mid-80s merely as a storage for his bus company. But when he saw Bobby, he realized these animals deserved a better life, and so he decided instead to modernize the zoo. This modern lion enclosure was originally opened in 2019 as Lion Pride Lands and housed white lions, which have now been replaced with Asiatic lions to support conservation breeding. Accordingly, the entire facility was redesigned and given a new Indian-themed look, which I really like thematically, even though the logo was perhaps applied a bit too generously on just about everything. The enclosure should be a little over 1,100 square meters in total and can be divided into two areas that visitors can view from various glass panels as well as from an elevated platform. The grounds are very appealing for visitors and lions alike, featuring a waterfall and a water stream, lush planting, resting platforms, and a large central viewing rock. Overall, it's a strong first impression of how much can be done with a relatively small park area. Even at least the part you see of their indoor enclosure looks really nice. The visitor experience is further enhanced by numerous educational elements, and in one hub there are terrariums with Asian reptiles and amphibians such as emerald skinks. Behind the lion enclosure we first come across a petting zoo with goats and an enclosure for alpacas, which, while not particularly spectacular, are nicely designed. The zebra enclosure behind it looks noticeably older, so the rectangular layout stands out a bit more negatively here to me. Just like the camel enclosure opposite though, these enclosures aren't huge, but they are still quite adequate. At the end of the row there was also a shared enclosure for capybaras and lowland tapirs. However, the tapirs are no longer part of the zoo's collection, at least for the time being, and the enclosure is being refurbished. So we get straight into the walkthrough kangaroo enclosure, which also houses emus in a separate area. A setup that is quite common, and even though it's by no means the most beautiful implementation, I'm quite sure it still offers a small highlight to many visitors. The path through the enclosure then takes us past a nicely designed habitat for meerkats and porcupines to the so-called Penguin Falls. This penguin enclosure was opened in 2017, around the same time that the Zoological Society of Hertfordshire launched as a charity. A turning point in the zoo's master plan with a strong focus on conservation and modern animal husbandry. Since then, the zoo has successfully participated in the African penguins breeding program, and they are raising funds for SANCOB, the Southern African Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds. Visitors can see and experience the penguins, especially during guided feedings, all in an enclosure that can also be viewed from above. Though honestly, I would have preferred an underwater view. Also dating from 2017 is Amazon and Beyond, a house featuring various South American reptiles and amphibians, as well as a fish tank. Overall, very well designed. I especially want to highlight the large, well-structured anaconda enclosure, which some other zoos could certainly take a page from. Gibbons' Song of the Forest is an even newer enclosure, only opened in 2024. As the name suggests, it's home to gibbons, more specifically the critical endangered northern white-cheeked gibbons. Visitors can observe them both in one of their indoor areas and in two spacious outdoor aviaries, which are beautifully designed and equipped, full of climbing opportunities, retreat spaces, and pretty much everything you could wish for in a gibbon habitat. It's no surprise that the enclosure was at least runner-up for Best New Exhibit at the 2025 Biasa Awards. The winner, by the way, was The Secret Life of Reptiles, which I already featured in the London Zoo video. And speaking of reptiles, the small gibbon house also once again contains terrariums where you can find crocodile lizards, for example. As the next stop, we are heading into the rainforest. However, don't expect a true tropical haul here. Still, the small building is home to quite a few representatives of South American wildlife, especially several marmosets and tamarins, such as the adorable pygmy marmosets or the wonderful golden lion tamarins. But there are also sloths living here, and with a bit of luck you might even spot armadillos on the ground. All in all, the building didn't exactly impress me. The animal keeping is decent, since the animals also have access to outdoor areas, but while the enclosures on one side still feel reasonably well integrated, those on the other side are simply very cramped and squeezed in. So it's certainly not a bad area, but it's one where the limited space becomes quite noticeable. And with that, starting with Jaguar Jungle, we are now entering what might be the most exciting area in the zoo. The exhibit, which opened in 2023, consists of 2 outdoor enclosures plus backstage areas. Visitors can look into the habitats through several glass viewing windows, some of which are elevated, allowing you to watch the jaguars climbing high above the ground. And yes, I was lucky enough to see the animals being very active and managed to capture some great footage. With the new exhibit, the space available to the jaguars has roughly doubled compared to the previous enclosure. Even so, these are not enormous habitats. What really defines them, however, is their verticality. The jaguars are given tall climbing structures reaching up to about 6 meters in height, along with hiding spots, caves, and even a pool, though that one could perhaps be a little deeper. Still, this is clearly one of the better jaguar exhibits I've come across during my travels. I mean, we recently talked about Edenia, the new mega tropical hall at Paradisa, a zoo with enormous financial resources that proudly claims to be the best zoo in Europe. But when you look at how jaguars are kept there now in a poorly indoor enclosure without real climbing structures, yeah, the much smaller Hertfordshire Zoo, likely working with a far more modest budget, has done a vastly better job here. So while money always helps, it isn't everything. In the end, good planning and thoughtful design is far more important. And even though the design isn't as flashy as in the Belgian set-piece zoo, the whole area feels very welcoming and the educational elements are impressive as well. This continues beautifully in the next exhibit. You can clearly see that Sunbear Heights was developed in parallel, opening in 2023 as well. It follows the same design philosophy, guiding visitors along both levels past the enclosures and offering plenty of fascinating views, this time also into the indoor areas. The enclosures feel slightly larger here, but still make full use of vertical space, which is essential for climbing-loving bears. I also saw one of the Sunbears sniffing around the ground, showing that the animals are actively engaged and kept mentally and physically fit. Finally, the path on both levels leads us into Land of the Tigers. This exhibit opened in 2020 and has been home to Amur tigers ever since. The main enclosure, which we here first observe from above, offers a solid amount of space and climbing structures. What really stands out, however, is the large bathing pool, which also contains some carp, though with a bit of luck you might even spot the tiger swimming. Yes, that's the kind of pool size I would have loved to see for the jaguars as well. Once more, visitors are offered many exciting perspectives, and overall I have very little to complain about, except that, as is often the case, the smaller secondary enclosure used for separating animals is a bit cramped. All in all, this entire section is truly impressive and very cohesive. Modern, well-designed enclosures that provide plenty for both animals and visitors. Guests also have two great options to grab a bite, the Sunbear Bakery and Paws and Pizza, so everything's perfect, right? Well, not quite, because there's one thing I haven't mentioned yet. Between the Jaguar and Sunbear exhibits, you'll find the Snow Leopard enclosure. And even at first glance you can clearly see it's older and doesn't quite measure up to the newer enclosures. It's not necessarily a bad enclosure, there's a lot made out of the available space here, and once again, verticality is perfectly utilized, so they get a great view of the adjacent road, which they keep a close eye on. Still, in the end, the overall floor space simply seems too small for me to call this a truly good enclosure. Behind Land of the Tigers, three smaller but very attractive species are waiting for us. You can already see the Asian small-clawed otters here, and I also managed to capture the red panda on camera, while unfortunately the binturongs decided not to show themselves. All three enclosures fall into the category of not particularly large but well designed. However, in the case of the binturongs, a mixed species exhibit with the sunbears would have been possible, but maybe they had good reason not to do that. Next we enter the Temple of Angkor, another beautifully themed small reptile house. Here you can see several snakes, as well as species like Fiji banded iguanas or black tree monitors, which are rarely kept in Europe outside the UK. There's even a dwarf crocodile living here in an enclosure that, like the others, is very nicely designed. In smaller terrariums you can also spot a few insects and even a tarantula. Passing by a zoo shop, we arrive at the next stop, a farm building. Of course, this barn and its surrounding area are mainly home to farm animals, including guinea pigs and rabbits, as well as Oxford Sandy and Blacks, A British breed of domestic pig that is considered endangered but can still be found in several UK zoos. According to Zootierliste, however, they are not kept anywhere outside the United Kingdom, at least not in a zoo. Somewhat surprisingly, you'll also find dwarf mangooses inside the barn, and as you can see, they had a very young offspring during my visit, which takes their cuteness to a whole new level. Behind the farmyard are the lemur exhibits. A row of fairly decent lemur aviaries houses red-ruffed lemurs, black and white-ruffed lemurs, the ring-tailed lemurs made famous by the Madagascar movies, and also black lemurs. As I said, the aviaries are perfectly acceptable, but it's still good news that a new habitat for them is currently being developed. The new enclosure will be 4 times larger, more than twice as high, and as you can already see from the concept images, it will be a walk-through exhibit, which should greatly improve the visitor experience as well. For us, the World of Animals section is slowly coming to an end. We take a stroll along the beautifully designed UK Centre of Survival Trail, which, as the name suggests, focuses on native wildlife. In addition to insect hotels and well-made educational displays, you'll also find large outdoor terrariums that are very nicely designed as well. You do have to look very closely though if you want to spot a northern viper, for example. You may have already noticed that, apart from the emus and penguins, we haven't actually seen any birds so far. That's because they have their own dedicated area called World of Birds. Around an arena where flight shows take place, you'll find several aviaries housing a wide variety of species. These range from owls, such as Eurasian eagle owls or barn owls, as well as various birds of prey to more exotic species like the red-legged Cerema. The black hornbill, which is kept only 5 times in the UK and just 11 times across all of Europe, unfortunately stayed rather hidden during my visit. Overall, this is a very solid bird area, and a new vulture aviary is currently under construction as well. In addition to all the birds, you'll also find this enclosure in the same area, which is home to African spurred tortoises. And that basically brings us to the end, but I still owe you a few words about the dinosaur area, which I skipped at the beginning. I want to use this now to start steering towards the conclusion, because I think this beautifully designed dinosaur forest full of impressive animatronic dinosaurs really highlights that Hertfordshire Zoo offers a fantastic experience for families with children especially. Not that adults can't get excited about dinosaurs too, but paired with all the play areas, this side of the zoo is undeniably a kid's paradise. And I think the zoo's compact size actually works in favor of a family visit. It's manageable, you are not overwhelmed, and you don't have to put your kids through long walks. So in line with the One Zoo 3 series on children's TV, Hertfordshire Zoo really is a very family-friendly experience. That being said, I was personally very impressed with parts of the zoo as well. Yes, the limited space does impose some constraints in certain areas, and sections like the hoofstock enclosures feel a bit plain due to their angular, functional design, but the entire stretch from Jaguar Jungle through Sunbear Heights to Land of the Tigers is just extremely well done, which makes the snow leopard enclosure stand out even more negatively. Still, I would argue that there are no really bad enclosures here, and Lions of India, along with the planned lemur enclosure, underscore that the remarkable development of the park continues. I was also very impressed with how prominently conservation is communicated throughout the zoo. The concept of do good and talk about it is definitely understood here, and that makes makes the park all the more appealing and likable to me. This zoo makes you really understand why someone like David Attenborough would say such a thing. I must admit though, the small size does limit how high I can rank it compared to other UK zoos I've visited, but it's probably unfair to compare Hertfordshire Zoo to much larger facilities like Whipsnade, Marwell Zoo, Chester Zoo, Colchester Zoo or Yorkshire Wildlife Park. And yes, we still have quite a few UK zoos left on the list, so feel free to check out the playlist to make sure that you haven't missed anything, and hit subscribe if you want to see what other UK zoos as well as zoos from all across of Europe or even the world have to offer. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this and let me know in the comments how you feel about Hertfordshire Zoo, whether it's your impression from the video or especially if you visited in person. And with that, a big thank you for your attention. See you soon, take care, goodbye und auf Wiedersehen. Yours truly, Martin.